Tonight I want to talk about something a bit different than some of the things that I've spoken about before. But again, as with everything else, I seldom talk about things I know nothing about. It's something that I find highly unappealing in other people, and I try my very best not to do it myself. So I have pretty full-on views about this, and because it's a medical issue, I'm going to insert a disclaimer here, because I know that some people sue people because they follow advice. It's just something about the modern world. So anyhow, I'm not a doctor. I'm not any kind of trained medical person. Consider my advice just like anyone else's advice. Do not follow it if you think it is wrong. Basically, what I want to talk about is the use of psychiatric drugs, and in particular, drugs for the control of depression and anxiety. The reason I chose to speak on this was because I saw a video about the American Mothers Act, which involves the routine screening and drugging of women in an attempt to stop postpartum depression, which is a very serious illness, right? But the woman in the video, she only began to have symptoms of postpartum depression after being administered antidepressant drugs when her son, soon after being born, was taken home and started throwing up continuously and appeared to be dying. After that, she became extremely anxious. They said she had postpartum depression and put her on drugs. After being put on the drugs, she began to have fantasies about killing her child and other people in her family. And when she told people about this, they didn't take her off of it. They just made her take more. And later on, she decided to take herself off, and she became normal. So, yeah. Now, I personally have a real issue with the fact that the pharmaceutical industry and the medical industry as a whole seem to be very keen on pathologizing and medicalizing normal parts of the human experience, such as anger, fear, pain, and sadness. These are all normal. It is part of the experience of being a human being, and even though sometimes, I'm not saying no one should take the drugs, sometimes in people's lives there are times when they cannot cope. And also, some people do have disorders of the brain that affect their brain chemistry, just like someone could be born with a disease or an imperfection in any other organ of the body. I'm not talking about that. What I'm saying is that doctors don't seem to ask people why they are in the state they're in before medicating people, which I think is a severe mistake. And I'll give you an example of something that happened to me. When I was about 17 years old, after I left school, I went and got a job in a supermarket. And everything was going okay. I didn't like the job, but everything was all right, I guess, until we got a new manager transferred in. And this new manager's idea of how to manage personnel was to constantly threaten people with being sacked. Now at this time, this was the second job I had ever had, and I took these things pretty seriously. He bullied people as well. It was a very negative environment. There was an Indigenous Aboriginal girl there, and she was subjected to racist remarks. There was a pretty blonde girl who worked there as well, and she was sexually harassed. And I was basically not happy. Also, at the same time, I was fighting with my mother constantly, and I was taking lots of drugs. Basically, smoking some marijuana, a lot, smoking a lot of marijuana, and had taken some acid. I don't know how much at this point. A bit though. Yeah. Anyway, so I had all these things going on. I started to have this weird thing where things became sort of like appeared more three-dimensional than normal, like when I was not on drugs. I went to the doctor and I told him about it. And he said that I was having panic attacks. And being 17 years old and a bit stupid, I was like, whoa, what's that? Blah, 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 you know. And he said, you know, it's a panic attack. Some people have them. It's caused by a disease. And he didn't even fill me out a script. He took a packet of the drugs out of his cupboard and handed them to me. And I said, how long am I going to have to be on these drugs? And he said, the rest of your life. Which I found quite shocking, considering I was only very young at the time. And the rest of my life seemed like an extremely long time, because it was, I'm assuming, unless something happens to me. Touch wood. Anyway, I hate those superstitious things. Yes. And I was on this drug, and I found that its side effects were really negative. I did not feel like myself at all. I did not react to things. You know, the analogy I use to describe that time in my life is that because I'd been fighting with my mum a lot prior, and that was one of my big problems, my mother could have waved a knife in my face and I would have laughed. That's sort of the way I saw it. And I was sleeping all the time. I had like almost like narcolepsy. I'd be on the bus going somewhere, and I'd just fall asleep. I'd be trying so hard not to fall asleep. I'd fall asleep. I was sleepy all the time. In the middle of the day, I would go to bed for no reason. Yeah. My interest in food was reduced as well. And generally, I just didn't feel like myself. And after about 6 months, I decided, nah, this is no good, and I took myself off of them. And I returned to what was normal for me at the time. I mean, I was a pretty disturbed person, but most of this was probably partly just being young, having been through some crazy stuff, and also the fact that I am a very intense person anyway. That is just who I am. And I think that, you know, it's a disability, and it's a positive thing. I've learnt to live with it in the 10 years since that time that I was just talking about. And this fits into part of my ethos about self-development. There are certain things about ourselves we just have to accept. But anyway, so I mean, to me, that really demonstrates how these things work. No one wanted to delve into where I was coming from. Like, my doctor was not interested. He didn't ask me, was I taking drugs? He didn't ask me, are you stressed out? How are things at home? Blah, blah, blah. He didn't ask me any of those things. He just wanted to give me the drugs. And it's probably because there's something in it for him.